Hello everyone, my name is Susha Mishra, and today I'm going to be reading to all of you one of my favorite kids' storybook of all time. It is called High in the Clouds, and it is written by, oh my gosh, Paul McCartney. You all know him as the major leader of the Beatles, right? Oh, anyways, let's get started, shall we? High in the Clouds. And the sub-authors are Geoff Dunbar and Philip Ardagh. Paul McCartney's lifelong interest in children's storytelling grew out of his childhood love of classic Disney. He has created a number of animated films in collaboration with Geoff Dunbar, including Rupert and the Frog Song, which won a BAFTA for Best Animated Short Film and became the best-selling short video of the year. His recent animated releases have included Domir's Law, which won a BAFTA for Best Short Animated Film, Tropic Island Hum, and Tuesday. So you see, Paul McCartney is a lot more than just being a musician. He's put his whole life into this, so please respect him. Geoff Dunbar is one of the world's finest animation directors. Among his many awards for film and television, Geoff has received 2 BAFTAs, a Palme d'Or at Cannes, a Golden Bear at Berlin, a Grand Prix at Ottawa, and La Spiga d'Or at Valladolid. Geoff lives near Oxford with his wife Jan and their 5 young children. Geoff Dunbar 2. Please respect him. Philip Ardagh has written over 60 children's books and is probably best known for his best-selling Eddie Dickens trilogy, currently translated into over 25 languages. So respect him as well. This book is dedicated to the ones we love. Now let's get started, shall we? Whirl the squirrel is lying back on his favorite branch, munching acorns from a bag as he listens to his mom telling one of her stories. It's like eating popcorn when you're enjoying a good film. This is one of Sugartail's Animalia tales set on the tropical island sanctuary where the animals live without a care in the world. Whirl smiles. Things aren't bad here either. A cool summer breeze, a good story, and the crunchiest of crunchy snacks. Unlike life in Megatropolis, he glances over to the huge ugly cityscape on the horizon, shrouded in pollution. Dotted among the branches of the trees, like notes on sheet music, sit the woodland creatures, all captivated by Sugartail's words. All that is, except for Snooze the owl, who's doing what he does best in the daytime, snoring gently. It's nothing personal. He's a night bird. For as long as Whirl can remember, his mother Sugartail has been the woodland storyteller, and for as long as he can remember, he's loved the stories about Animalia best. She's coming to the part of the story where the island animals are about to throw a big party for some reason or other, or for no reason at all, when Whirl feels the branch begin to vibrate. It's just a tremble to begin with, but then the tremble becomes a shudder, and the shudder becomes a judder. Tethered to its usual branch is a hot air balloon, and in its wicker basket stands Froggo, a frog. The clue is in the name. He is a regular visitor to the woodland, coming and going when the mood and the wind takes him. He may be green, furless, and lack a tail, but Whirl thinks that he's a fun amphibian to be around. No sooner has the tree started to shake than Froggo has fired up the balloon and is floating it above the treetops to see what's going on. He can't believe his froggy eyes. In fact, he takes off his glasses and gives both lenses a good clean on a corner of his scarf before putting them back on again just to be doubly sure. But things still look just as bad. In fact, more so. Bulldozers, shouts Froggo. A whole battalion of them. And he's not lying. What follows is a nightmare of noise and destruction. What the huge caterpillar tires don't flatten is either pushed over, thrown aside, or torn apart by the bulldozers and their merciless metal teeth. Petrol-powered chainsaws splutter to life, winding their way through tree trunk after tree trunk, slicing, slashing, killing the woodland. The animals flee in all directions, abandoning their homes and trees in a desperate bid to save themselves. Even Snooze is now as wide awake as he's ever been and has taken flight. Oh no. Whirl dashes straight down the tree trunk like only a squirrel can, looking back over his shoulder to make sure that Mum is close behind him. She isn't. Suddenly, the huge old tree is falling, and moments later, Sugartail's limp white body lies twisted beneath a broken branch. "No!" cries Whirl. "No!" He claws at the soft earth with his tiny paws and drags her out from under it. His mother opens an eye and somehow manages to speak. "You must go far from here," she whispers. Whirl has to learn in close to hear her above the noise of the mayhem all around them. He can smell sweet chestnuts on her breath. "You must find Animalia. You'll be safe there. It's a real island. Whirl, it's real." Which is how talk of this magical sanctuary comes to be Sugartail's final words. Whirl gently lies her lifeless body on a patch of springy moss. "Whirl, hurry," says a voice. "Get in, we must leave now." The young squirrel turns to see Froggo hovering close by in his balloon, a rope ladder trailing from the basket to the ground. Whirl shakes his head and says something Froggo can't hear above the deafening sound of the destruction all around them. "It's too late for your dear mother," Froggo shouts. "You must save yourself!" "There's something I must do first," Whirl calls up. "Alone." A little later, Whirl is standing in the shallows of a small stream. With both paws, he's holding the raft his father once made from twigs bound together with stripped vines. On it, he's laid Sugartail's lifeless body, and has covered it with every type of wildflower he could find in the chaos. "Goodbye, Mum," he whispers, and he lets go of the raft, which is instantly caught by the current and carried swiftly downstream, away from the terrifying events in what's left of her beloved woodland. At a respectful distance, a few of the animals, braving the dangers of the bulldozers and chainsaws, look on. Whirl only turns from the stream when the raft is fully out of sight. Froggo strides towards him. Though one of his legs is wooden, he moves with surprising speed. "Now, will you come with me?" he pleads. "I need to do some thinking," says Whirl, head bent low. There's an ear-splitting creak, and a tree comes crashing down only inches away from him. He doesn't even seem to notice. Froggo sighs a wide-mouthed sigh and reaches inside the pocket of his flying jacket. He pulls out a small blue envelope and presses it into Whirl's paw. "I understand," he says, "but there's something you need to understand." Whirl, "If you ever need me, open that, follow the instructions, and I'll be there, okay?" "Okay," says Whirl. "Thank you." His mind is clearly on other things. Well, one thing in fact, trying to find the island of Animalia. With the woodland in its dying moments and his friends all gone, Whirl decides to look for answers in the city. Thrusting a few hastily snatched items into a rucksack, he begins his long trek. The squirrel isn't aware of time. He doesn't keep track of how many days it takes him to reach Megatropolis. 2? 3? All he knows is that his old life is over, and that his feet are very sore. When he finally arrives at the sprawling outskirts of the city, it comes as a surprise. From the treetops of the woodland, Megatropolis looked to be made up almost entirely of skyscrapers. Here in front of him, though, is a shanty town of cardboard boxes and packing crates. The word "Sticks" has been crudely painted onto a makeshift sign made out of an old plank. Whirl wrinkles his nose. This neighborhood smells bad. Picking his way through the rubbish and past the shacks, he sees Sticks' inhabitants watching him with dull eyes. Although he sees animals of many different kinds, they all have much in common. They look hungry, dirty, and desperate. It's with a real sense of relief that Whirl finally comes to a road and sees proper brick-built houses beyond. Stepping off the pavement, there's a terrible roar as a huge automobile thunders straight towards him. The squirrel finds himself flying through the air as at the very last moment, he's yanked to safety by a pair of strong paws. "Thanks for saving my skin," Whirl splutters, struggling to his feet and dusting himself down. He has the foul taste of the car's exhaust fumes in his mouth. "I'm William the Squirrel, but my friends call me Whirl." "Hi, Will," says the creature, a young rat who's undoubtedly just saved his life. "I'm Ratsy. You may have heard of my dad, Papa Ratsy." He pauses and grins, then adds, "The photographer." Whirl shakes his head. "No, sorry, I'm from out of town." "Never mind," says Ratsy with a shake of the head. "I should have guessed that from your road sense." "My what?" "Exactly, you don't have none." Ratsy tilts back his head and sniffs the air. "Need someone with a nose for the city to show you around?" he asks. "You'll do that for me?" asks Whirl. "Sure I would," says Ratsy, grinning another ratty grin. "Squirrels are just tree rats, ain't they? That makes you a kind of country cousin. We're as good as related." He takes his baseball hat off his own head and plonks it down on top of Whirl's. He then slaps the squirrel on the back, almost sending him stumbling back out into the path of the oncoming traffic. Despite everything that has happened to him, Whirl actually finds himself smiling for the first time in days. Perhaps Megatropolis won't be so bad after all, he thinks, not with a friend like Ratsy around. We live and learn. Ratsy has work to do, apparently, but arranges to meet up with Whirl later. "When you hear the evening shift siren sound, come to the chowdown," he says. "How will I hear the evening shift siren or recognize it?" asks Whirl. "And where's the chowdown?" Ratsy grins one of his sharp-toothed ratty grins. "Don't worry, you'll hear the siren all right. And when you do, you'll know it. As for the chowdown, it's the building shaped like a big bowl." He points into the distance. Before Whirl knows quite what's happening, Ratsy dashes off with a "see you later," disappearing down an alleyway. Bye," Whirl shouts after him, not knowing quite how much time he has to kill before they meet again. If Ratsy really does show up, that is, Whirl decides to explore the city, keeping the chowdown in view. After a while, he catches sight of a very rare thing in Megatropolis. It's a tree! And because squirrels and trees go together like dogs and lampposts, or hippos and mudbats, Whirl heads for it. It's as he rounds the corner that he first lays eyes on Wilhelmina. She's a beautiful young red squirrel and is being bothered by a couple of badgers. "I said leave me alone," says Wilhelmina bravely, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "Or what?" snarls the bigger of the badgers. "You'll tickle us with that big bushy tail of yours." "Oh, I'm so scared," taunts the other. Whirl's got to do something, but what use is one more squirrel against two mean-looking badgers? Everyone knows that they're all muscle. He dashes up the trunk of the tree behind him and into the branches. From his squirrel's eye vantage point, he looks down. "Leave the kid alone," he shouts, trying to make his voice sound as deep and threatening as possible. "Or what?" repeats the bigger badger. By way of an answer, Will drops his rucksack between the branches straight onto the bully's head. "Or the rest of us will come and get you," he yells. Rubbing his head, the bigger badger stares up through the leaves with a slightly dazed expression, trying to see just how many other squirrels there really are up there. Wilhelmina seizes the opportunity to dash up the tree herself. "Now clear off," shouts Whirl. Snatching the rucksack, the badgers do just that, fearing attack from a squirrel army. Up in the leafy branches, Wilhelmina turns to Whirl. "Thanks for coming to my rescue," she says. "I would have been fine, but you speeded things up a little, and I'm sorry about your losing your stuff." "That's okay," says Whirl. They swap names. "It's good to be okay to another squirrel again. Megatropolis seems such a horrible place," he says. "I've only been here a few hours, and I've almost been run over, and now this?" "You haven't even scratched the surface," says Wilhelmina. She scampers out to the end of a branch and points to a skylight on the roof of a vast building sprawled out beneath them. Whirl finds himself looking through the glass into an enormous factory, filled with animal workers, each with that same look of hopelessness he's seen back in the sticks. Up on a ledge, high above the factory floor, stands the biggest, fattest rat Whirl has ever laid eyes on. The buttons on his waistcoat are set to burst. "That's Wackford, the boss's right-hand rat," says Wilhelmina. "Foreman of all her factories. Her Mr. Fix-It." At that moment, Wackford cracks an evil-looking whip. "Get on with it, you lazy layabouts," he bellows. "There are orders to be filled, productivity targets to be met." It's then that Whirl notices a huge G logo on the factory wall. There's something frighteningly familiar about it. "It's slave labor," Wilhelmina explains. "The poor animals in the sticks work to make the city dwellers even richer. The very poorest of them never even get to leave the factories at all. They're prisoners." "If only we could get everyone to Animalia," Whirl mutters, the rage growing inside him. "You know about the island?" asks Wilhelmina in amazement. "I have a friend who's heard stories about—" Just then there's a terrible crunch. Froggo has crash-landed his hot air balloon in the tree. "Hello, hello," grins Whirl's froggy friend. "Sorry I'm late." "Late," says Whirl, "but I didn't know you were coming." "I was talking to Wilhelmina," says his amphibian pal. Then his face breaks into another toothless smile. "Whirl, it's you! I didn't recognize you in that cap. How good to see you again so soon." "You know Froggo?" Whirl asks Wilhelmina just as Wilhelmina asks him exactly the same question. Wilhelmina tells Froggo how Whirl rescued her from the badgers. "This part of the city isn't the safest place to be," says Froggo, "which is why I'm going to give young Wilhelmina here a ride home." "Why not come to the chow down to meet Ratsy?" Whirl says excitedly. "When?" asks Wilhelmina. "When the evening shift siren sounds," says Whirl. "Whenever that." His words are drowned out by a sound so loud that it buffets the hot air balloon against the branches and makes Whirl and Wilhelmina's fur blow out in one direction, as though they're standing by a giant hairdryer. To say that the noise is loud would be like saying that the Grand Canyon is a bit of a crack in the ground. When it finally stops, Whirl's ears are ringing and he's shaking. That was the evening shift siren, wasn't it?" "Yup," says Wilhelmina. "It most certainly was," nods Froggo. "Now the evening shift will start in all the factories across the city." Froggo gives them a lift to the chowdown. Whittle has never seen so many animals crowded together. He's used to the wide open spaces of the woodland, which is, of course, no more. Ratsy, however, seems totally at home. "Hi," he says cheeringly as he wanders in through the door. "I see you got us a good table. Now let's eat." The food arrives and they talk. Ratsy tells them more about himself. "I work for the most powerful player in Megatropolis," he says proudly. "Her name's Gretch. If you ain't heard of her yet, you soon will. She owns all the factories round here." "She pretty much runs the city," Wilhelmina adds. Whirl thinks of the G logo on the bulldozers and in the factory. G for Gretch, he wonders. "More than likely." "Don't you hate working for someone who treats other animals so badly?" he asks. The young rat shrugs. "That's just how it is," he says. "Rich and poor, free and slaves. It's always been that way." "Not everywhere," says Whirl. "In the woodland, we were free until now." He pauses. "But in Animalia, all the animals are free, equal, and safe." "Where?" asks Ratsy, and Whirl tells him about the amazing island. "Wow," says Ratsy when he's finished. "It sounds a cool place, but are you sure it ain't just make-believe?" "It's real," says Whirl, remembering his mother's final words. "Want to see where Gretch lives?" asks Ratsy once they've finished eating his treat. "It's an amazing apartment, and I know a secret way in." "What about one of her factories?" suggests Whirl, an idea forming in his mind. He's already considering a great escape. Ratsy shakes his head. "No way," he says. "All the locks and all the gates of all the factories are computer controlled, and only Gretch knows the password." "Then let's see her apartment," says Whirl. In the shadow stands an eavesdropper, a certain large and very frightening rat, with buttons set to burst. Animalia, huh? He grins. How very interesting. Ratsy leads the two young squirrels through a warren of passages beneath the city. Sewers, long-forgotten service tunnels, a disused railway tunnel, rainwater outlets, and vast pipes of every description. There is a constant drip, drip, dripping. The air is dank, and more often than not, the walls are very slimy. After a while, they reach an underground river. We must cross here, says Ratsy, his voice echoing. How? Asks Squirrel. Stilts? Gladys, grins Ratsy. What's a Gladys? Asked Wilhelmina. Gladys isn't a what, she's a who, explains Ratsy. He lets out a piercing whistle, and the head of an enormous crocodile breaks through the surface of the water. The squirrels rear back in surprise. The croc smiles. She appears to have no teeth at all. No one. Oh, hello, she pauses. Ratsy, says Ratsy. Ah, yes, Ratsy, nods Gladys the crocodile. Forgive me, my eyesight isn't what it used to be, and all you sewer rats do look much the same to me. We was hoping for a ride across the river, Gladys, says Ratsy, ignoring the sewer rat comment, though. Even in this dim light, Whirl can see that he didn't like it. I'd be happy to oblige, says the crocodile. Do please climb aboard. Her long snout acts like a swing bridge. They step onto her nose on one side of the river. She swings it across, and they step off onto the other. Thank you, Whirl calls out. Thank you so much. My pleasure, beams Gladys. I'm most glad of the company. I'm an opera singer, you see. The acoustics down here are splendid. Do come again. Then she bursts into song. Come again, my rodent friends, down the pipes and round the bends. I write all my own material, you know. At long last, Whirl, Wilhelmina, and Ratsy reach an enormous service duct, full of brightly colored pipes rising high above them like multicolored columns. Some painted with polka dots, and others strippy like barber's poles. These lead up to Gretchen's pad, says Ratsy. Even her plumbing's got style, he adds with a hint of pride. Real designer stuff. Why now? Asks Wilhelmina. The only way's up, grins the rat. No problem, says Whirl. He's a squirrel, isn't he? And one thing squirrels are particularly good at is climbing. He and Wilhelmina are leaping nimbly from pipe to pipe before Ratsy has even had a chance to clamber up the first few inches. The two young squirrels reach a grill which lifts easily out of place. Ratsy has been in and out this way many times before, remember? Tiptoeing across a deep pile carpet, they realize that they're in a bedroom. And there, on a huge carved wooden bed, propped up against a pile of pillows, sits a, well, what exactly is she? A sort of hairless ape wearing a huge blonde wig. She's talking, shouting actually on the phone. This must be the all-powerful Gretch. She doesn't look particularly stylish to me, thinks Whirl. They said what? Gretch is demanding. Animalia? Well, if it does exist, then we must find it, Wackford, she bellows into the phone, her wig wobbling with each shouted syllable. The blood drains from Whirl's face. She's found out about the island, but how? When Gretch speaks again, the terrible truth dawns on him. What else did this young squirrel have to say about the place, she asks. Wackford speaks at the other end of the line. Gretch listens, then issues her orders. We find Animalia and we destroy Animalia, she proclaims. We can't let stories of a tropical island paradise spread. Symbols of hope must be eliminated. Whittle is stunned. He's been in Megatropolis less than a day, and he's already put Animalia and its inhabitants in danger. This isn't how it's supposed to be. He and Wilhelmina are creeping past the ugly footboard of the enormous bed when Gretch catches sight of him. What have we here? She snarls, and with frightening agility, she leaps from the bed to the floor. Wackford warned me to expect uninvited company, she cries, in hot pursuit. Where's Ratsy, that treacherous little rat friend of yours? She makes a swipe for the young squirrels, and horror of horrors manages to get Wilhelmina in her claw-like grip, her wig falling askew. Gotcha! She snarls in triumph. Whittle spins around and starts running to the aid of his captured friend. Everything is going wrong, so terribly wrong. No! Wilhelmina cries. Find Animalia! Warn the animals! But just go! Wilhelmina shouts. I'll be back, cries Whirl. In his heart of hearts, he knows that he's defenseless against whatever kind of creature this Gretsch is. He dives through the grill opening and darts back down the colored pipes to safety. There's no sign of Ratsy anywhere, and Whirl will need help to rescue Wilhelmina and to find the island. Luckily, he knows just the right animal to do that. Froggo! He's even got his own transport. Running through the endless maze of tunnels, Whirl heads for a spot of daylight and finds another way out, through luck more than anything. Back in the fresh air at last, he digs his hand in his pocket and pulls out the small blue envelope that Froggo gave him back in the woodland. It's a little crumpled, but none the worse for wear. He tears it open. Inside is a blue card on which is written, light blue touch paper and retire. Whirl frowns. That's what it says on fireworks, he recalls, remembering an impressive display Froggo put on in the woodland one year. How strange. The young squirrel lights the card using a book of matches from the chowdown. The card shoots up into the air and explodes into an awe-inspiring and can it really be happening fireworks display of utter brilliance with showers of sparks, bangs, flares, and spangles, which ends with the sky being filled with the word Froggo. These fall away letter by letter like fairy dust. Wow, that was impossible, Whirl muses, which is something of an understatement. Now what? Less than 5 minutes have passed when Whirl spots a tiny dot in the sky. It gets bigger and bigger as it gets nearer and nearer. It's Froggo's balloon, and it's coming this way! Look out, shouts Whirl as the large wicker basket comes to earth with a thud, missing him by a squirrel's whisker, if squirrels have whiskers. With no time to lose, Whirl clambers aboard, telling the amphibious aviator of Wilhelmina's capture and his need to find Animalia. We must rescue Wilhelmina and warn the islanders of Gretsch's plan, says Whirl. It's my fault she found out about it in the first place. No, we must warn the islanders first, and then enlist their help to rescue Wilhelmina and all the enslaved animals. That's the way to do it, says Froggo. Now where exactly is it? Where's what? Animalia. I don't know, Whirl confesses. Your mother never told you how to get there? No. Oh, says Froggo, looking about as crestfallen as a crestfallen frog can look. Never mind, the thing about islands is that they're all surrounded by water. So let's begin by searching the 7 seas. All 7? Sighs Whirl. Where should we start? Froggo grins another froggy grin. We'll let the balloon decide. Time passes, winds change, clear blue skies become dark and brooding. Whirl and Froggo are in the middle of a storm. Waves crash below them while thunder crashes above. A fork of lightning tickles the edge of the basket. That was too close for comfort, cries Froggo, but he looks like he's loving every minute of it. Whirl, however, manages to look both airsick and seasick at the same time, and his gray fur is soaked right through. Far away, back in Megatropolis, Wilhelmina is in one of Gretsch's factories. To be more precise, she's in a cage in the basement in one of the factories. It's a bit like a dungeon, and is where the day shift workers are locked away at night, and for a few meager hours of sleep. Daylight comes from one tiny barred glassless window, high up in the wall behind Wilhelmina. She watches drops of rain trickle down the brickwork, hoping and praying that Whirl will get to warn the animals of Animalia in time. Hurry back, she whispers with a shudder. After 2 days and 2 nights, the storm clears, and the white fluffy cotton wool clouds part beneath Froggo's balloon to reveal a glorious tropical island shimmering in a sparkling sea. Great blue whales are leaping out of the ocean, as if to greet the newcomers. Is that? Whirl stutters. It looks that way, nods Froggo. But how? Serendipity, suggests Froggo. Seren what? asks Whirl. Dippity, says Froggo. Fortuitous luck. Magic, more like, says Whirl in wonder. After some tricky maneuvering, the balloon finally touches down on the sun-warmed golden sands. Whirl and Froggo have been spotted, and a welcoming committee is waiting to greet the new arrivals. A single shaggy figure towering high above them. Welcome to our island, says the dapperly dressed beast, his voice rich and deep like chocolate, with the hint of a chuckle. I am Chief Bison. I'm Whirl and this is Froggo, says the squirrel, eager to get the introductions out of the way. We came to warn... Greetings, Whirl. Greetings, Froggy, says the chief as he removes his hat and makes a sweeping bow. It's Froggo, actually, Froggo mutters. But Whirl is already ungently explaining why they've come, warning the chief of the dangers of Gretch. You must prepare to defend yourselves, he finishes. Whatever reaction Whirl is expecting, it isn't this. Chief Bison lets out a rumbling laugh. We're quite safe here, he says. Our island has always been free. Froggo and Whirl do their best to convince him otherwise. They jump up and down, they wave their arms around, and they tell the chief more about the evil Gretch and her dreadful factories. A frown appears on Chief Bison's shaggy gray features. He puts his massive arms around Froggo and Whirl and guides them toward the lush green undergrowth. We must gather the council, he announces gravely. The meeting takes place in the clearing and is attended by all creatures great and small. Every single islander is given the chance to have his or her say, from the biggest elephant down to the smallest of beetles. Chief Bison calls the meeting to order and turns to Whirl. Now please tell everybody what you told me about this hairless ape and her despicable plans, he booms. After listening to Whirl's story tale, there's much squawking, gibbering, grunting, and general ballyhoo from the assembled company. Finally, after much discussion, it is agreed that the threat is real and that Animalia must be defended at all costs. After which we will free our imprisoned brothers and sisters from Megatropolis, Chief Bison proclaims. Froggy here will fly back to the city and spread the news. Actually, it's Froggo, says the frog. Froggo, short for Frogmorton, F-R-O. And he'll need a map, Whirl interrupts. We have no idea how we got here. All in good time, says Chief Bison. But first, we must celebrate your arrival. 200 guests who risked the life and limb, he stares at Froggo's wooden leg, to warn us. The truth be told, Whirl and Froggo would be happier if preparations for defending the island got underway immediately. But Chief Bison won't hear a word of it. He's keen on island tradition. And the arrival of guests calls for what we call a tropic island hum, he beams. The hum is a musical celebration, and this particular hum goes on late into the night. Whirl wanders away from the center of the celebrations and sits at the ocean's edge. He looks at the beautiful inky sky above, lit with glittering stars, and sees it mirrored by the silvery starfish swimming happily in the sea below. If only his mother, Sugartail, had lived to see this. And if only Wilhelmina was here to share it with him, too. Time passes. Back in Megatropolis. Back in the basement dungeon of one of Gretch's factories. Back in her cage, Wilhelmina is examining the bars of her prison. Through them, she can see a big bunch of keys hanging next to the television monitors at the guard station. Trouble is, I need to get out of the cage to get to the key to get me out of the cage in the first place, she sighs. Suddenly, she gets a terrible itch in her tail and is about to give it a good scratch with her paws when a tiny voice shouts, Please be careful where you put your claws. I'm a circus flea in search of some warm, dry fur to spend this cold, wet night. He hops into view. I'm Alfredo, says the flea. You're very large for a flea, says Wilhelmina in surprise. I work out, says Alfredo modestly. He flexes his muscles. Wilhelmina introduces herself and tells Alfredo how she ended up here. Like just about every other creature in Megatropolis, Alfredo seems to have 101 reasons of his own for hating Gretch too. He hops over to the guard station and tries to lift the keys, but they're a large bunch and he's only a small flea. No luck. Sorry, he says, exhausted after all that wasted effort. Just then, a very friendly, very green face appears at the tiny barred window high up in the wall. Froggo, Wilhelmina whoops. I thought I might find you here, Froggo grins, holding onto the bars to steady his balloon. I think it's time I got you free. The animals of Animalia have been warned and hurry, squeaks Alfredo. Who said that? Asks a surprised Froggo, wondering whether the squirrel has an invisible friend. There's no time to explain, says Wilhelmina. She points at the keys on the bunch. One of those opens this. She rattles the padlock to her cage. No problem, says Froggo. He takes one of the guide ropes hanging from the basket of his balloon, leans through the bars, and in one or two fell swoops, he's lassoed the bunch of keys and flicked it over to Wilhelmina, who frantically tries each key in the lock. Hurry, Alfredo squeaks, even more urgently than before, as he sees Gretchen Wackford on the monitors getting closer and closer. Gretchen Wackford are on their way! Bingo, fourth key lucky. It turns in the lock and the squirrel spills out of her cage. She's free. This way, Froggo urges, and Wilhelmina scrambles up the guide rope, still dangling from the tiny window. What about freeing the others from this factory? She pants. You go, shouts Alfredo. Leave it to the flea. I'll try to set them free. Oh, it's a flea, Froggo smiles to himself. No wonder I can't set him from here. I can't see him from here. I'm good with computers, Alfredo shouts. I'll try to find Gretchen's password to open all the doors and gates. Gretchen Wackford burst into a room just in time to see Wilhelmina scrambling through the window into the basket of Froggo's balloon. Quick, they're getting away, screams Gretch. She's quivering with rage, her wig wobbling like a giant trifle. Wackford simply smiles, whips out an extraordinary-looking device, half gun, half catapult, and fires it at the balloon. Missed, shouts Froggo as the balloon takes flight. Not exactly, grins Wackford. He turns to Gretch. They'll never know it's there, he says. But what the evil rat and his even more evil mistress Gretch don't know is that there's a highly intelligent flea sitting quietly on the computer keyboard. As Froggo and Wilhelmina sail off through the clouds towards Animalia, laughing in triumph and relief at her dramatic rescue, Gretch and Wackford hurry this way and that, down various corridors and through various heavily guarded doorways until they reach one huge riveted iron door. Gretch punches in a code and the door opens to reveal her very own state-of-the-art custom-built gunboat. They clamber aboard and are soon seated on the bridge. Wackford flicks a few switches and a map of the ocean appears on a screen. There's a flashing dot of light. There they are, grins the Rattus. Now all we have to do is follow them. It wasn't Wilhelmina or Froggo he'd been firing at back in the basement, but Froggo's balloon. And it wasn't a bullet he'd fired, but an electronic tracking device, now finally embedded in the base of the wicker basket, which Gretch will be able to trace all the way to Animalia. Victory's in my grasp, she cackles, her wig wobbling again, this time with excitement. Alfredo, meanwhile, is hard at work at the computer keyboard, trying to find a way to access Gretch's secret password. He jumps from key to key, grunting at the effort and muttering, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Every time he presses enter, the words access denied appear, taunting him on the screen, but he isn't about to give up. With the map Chief Bison gave him and his own remarkable knowledge of air currents, slipstreams, and all things aeronautical, it takes less than a day for Froggo to steer his balloon back to Animalia. It's Rumpus, the monkey, on lookout duty up a palm tree, who's the first to spot the dot in the sky. Company, we got company, he jabbers. Friend or foe? Asks Chief Bison, woken from a nap. He slips on his jacket. Gun to tell, chatters Rumpus. Friend, says Caca, a brightly colored parrot, swooping in to land on the chief's shoulder. It's Froggo, and he's got a red squirrel with him. That'll be Wilhelmina, says an excited Whirl. He and the islanders swarm around the balloon as it comes in to land. Mission accomplished, I say, Chief Bison gives a deep-throaty chuckle. Well done, Froggy. It's Froggo with an O, actually, says the frog. Climbing from the basket, but his words are drowned out by the cheers of the other animals as they scoop the returning hero up onto Chief Bison's shoulder. Wilhelmina throws her arms around Whirl and gives him the greatest hug of his life, when crack, there's an explosion. Someone's firing at the island. Whomp! Now mortar shells are exploding all around them. Crump! The animal islanders scatter in all directions. A palm tree is split in two and comes crashing to the ground. Gretch's gunboat is announcing her arrival. To the defenses, orders Chief Bison, and what feeble defenses they turn out to be. Animalia is an island that's only ever known peace. The animals seem to know nothing about warfare. They have a single barricade ringing the island made up of wooden boxes, carts, some even still have a fruit in them, driftwood, some fencing, and even an old mangle that was washed up from a sinking cargo ship in 1896. And the islanders' weapons? Broom handles, branches, saucepans, ladles, and piles of coconuts, some of which in end-range Rumpus the monkey is lobbing in the direction of the gunboat. They all fall short of their target, landing with useless thuds in the wet sand of the shoreline. A baby hippo called Muddles has somehow managed to find a pair of boxing gloves and is punching the air, grunting with the effort of each jab. The only animals with any real protection are the armadillo with his scales and a very, very old tortoise with his shell, neither of which is a defense against bullets and mortars. But every animal stands shoulder to shoulder to defend their island and the freedom it stands for. Whirl and Wilhelmina run to join this brave ragbag army, and between them, they hold the flag of Animalia up high. Freedom! Shout the islanders, waving what so-called weapons they have. A voice cuts through the air, blasted through speakers on the gunboat. Surrender, and I'll spare you for my factories! Whirl instantly recognizes it as Gretch herself. Fight, and I'll take no prisoners! On board, Wackford is doing what he does best, giving orders. Reload the guns, he barks. And who's the only other crew member on board? Who's that staggering across the floor with a huge mortar shell in his paws? It's none other than Ratsy, the first so-called friend Whirl made on arriving in Megatropolis. Aye, aye, Captain, he says, loading the enormous gun. Soon another deadly round of shells is fired, hitting the barricade, but fortunately none of the animals. The islanders quickly scurry around repairing the break, the birds hauling pieces into place with their beaks. What a little good it'll do them. If ever the phrase, fighting a losing battle seems right, it seems right now. But things are about to change. Suddenly, the gunboat starts tilting, first one way and then the other. Wackford loses his footing and falls with a thud. Gretch slams into a wall, her face pressing up flat against a porthole, but manages to stay upright, which is more than can be said for her wig, which now has a jaunty leaning Tower of Pisa look about it. What's happening? She screams. What's happening is that Gretch hasn't bargained for Animalia's sea defenses. With all her thoughts on destroying the island itself, it hadn't occurred to her that the real threat may lie in the water. And now a small fleet of whales rises to the surface. Peace-loving, beautiful, and graceful whales may be, but they're also mighty big. They swim round and round the gunboat, causing it to bob about like a plastic duck in a bath. Up in the balloon, piloted by Froggo, Chief Bison throws a huge net over the gunboat. It's a net which Whirl last saw strung up between the trees, covered in balloons, and used as a roof for the band during the Tropic Island hunt. The whales grab the edges of the net in their mouths, holding the gunboat like a fly in a spider's web. A mighty cheer goes up from the animals on the barricade on the shore. Surrender! Chief Bison bellows through a homemade megaphone. Gretch comes out onto the dock and looks up at him through the meshing of the net. Or you do what? She laughs. The net still clenched firmly in their mouths. The whales turned and began to swim away from the boat in different directions. The net tightens, beginning to push the gunboat beneath the surface. Froggo is whispering in the Bison's ear. The chief nods, then speaks to Gretch again. Tell us the password that opens the gates to all your evil factories. All your slaves and prisoners must be freed. Never! Screams Gretch. I fought tougher animals than you. Wait! Someone cries above the din. Back on the shore, Whirl turns to Wilhelmina. I know that voice. It's Ratsy. Traitor! Cries Wilhelmina. Now Ratsy can be seen on deck. Wait, he repeats. The password is... Wackford bursts through a doorway and chases the smaller rat who's dodging this way and that. Incarcerate! It's incarcerate! With that, Ratsy dives off the edge of the boat, leaving Wackford clutching thin air. Another cheer goes up from the Animalian Islanders. The whales use the net to drag the boat ashore, beaching it on the golden sands. The animals throw their hats in the air in celebration. Well, not just their hats, anything in fact, including each other. Rumpus grabs Muddles the little hippo's arm and holds it up, like a referee declaring the winner of a boxing bout. Caw-caw, the parrot wheels and dives through the sky above them, performing victory roll after victory roll. Not bad for your first battle, Froggo tells the bison as they come into land. And hopefully our last, Froggo, says the chief. Actually, it's Froggy, says Froggo, and then stops himself. He grins a froggy grin and then laughs out loud. No, you were right the first time. Chief Bison, meanwhile, is off wading into the water. He drags out a very bedraggled and crestfallen-looking Ratsy indeed. Whirl and Wilhelmina run over to the young rat. Were you on Gretch's side all along? Whirl demands. Did you trick us into going to her apartment so that she could take us prisoner? No, Ratsy cries. I was showing off to you, that was all, but Wackford found out. So why didn't he lock you up with the rest of her workforce? Demands Wilhelmina. Because Gretch thought I might be kind of useful. I knew you knew about Animalia. I had to do what they said, guys. I had to. I'm not as tough, as strong-willed as you two. And he did find out the password, Froggo points out, stepping up behind him. I'm real sorry, says Ratsy. Can you forgive me? Wilhelmina puts a coat around his shivering shoulders. I forgive you, she says. Me too, says Whirl. After all, you did save my life. I did? Whirl nods. The car, remember? You pulled me out of the way of that car when I first set foot in Megatropolis. Now it's Ratsy's turn to grin. That's right, so I did. And if they can forgive you, Ratsy, so can we, booms Chief Bison. But as for these two, they're a different matter. He strides across the sand to Wackford and Gretch, who are now tied together back to back with leafy vines. We'll have to think of a suitable punishment for you. Without her high-heeled shoes and wig, and with her fancy clothes dripping wet and ruined, Gretch looks anything but threatening. And Wackford, without his whip, he looks like one defeated and seriously overweight rat. As the animals take down the barricade and begin to get Animalia ready for the biggest celebration party in the island's history, Whirl, Wilhelmina, and Ratsy climb aboard the beached gunboat with the aid of a friendly giraffe called Jeffrey, who lets them use his neck as a gangplank. Show us how we can radio the guard station in the main factory, Whirl tells Ratsy. Why? asks the rat. You'll see, says Wilhelmina. Pleased to be able to help at last, Ratsy leads them to the bridge and presses a few buttons. Speak in there, he says. Wilhelmina picks up the radio transmitter. This is Wilhelmina calling Alfredo. Wilhelmina calling Alfredo. Do you receive me, Alfredo? A few moments later, a tiny voice crackles across the airwaves. Alfredo here, reading you loud and clear. We got the password, says Wilhelmina. It's incarcerate. There's a clickety-clack as Alfredo the Flea jumps on each letter in turn. INCARCERATE. Then he jumps on enter. Then, silence, interrupted only by the crackle of static on the radio. Finally, Alfredo speaks at last. It worked! He whoops with joy. I can open all the doors! Then do it, shouts Whirl. He, Wilhelmina, and Ratsy give each other a group hug. Great teamwork, says Froggo from outside a porthole. Climb aboard, my furry friends. There's more to be done. Only a few days have passed, but in that time, a whole flotilla of boats has been assembled in the docks of Megatropolis. Each is crammed with as many as the freed animals as it can take. There's a rowing boat full of grubby bunnies, a canoe containing a young elephant and at the back and a fox at the front, an old cargo ship with so many different types of creatures, it looks like a modern-day Noah's Ark. And that's just 3 vessels in hundreds. Smaller vessels are tied to bigger ones. Those with engines will tow those without. Up in the air is the balloon with Froggo, Whirl, and Wilhelmina looking down on the incredible scene beneath them. Look, it's Gladys, Wilhelmina points. Sure enough, far below, Gladys, the toothless crocodile, has swum out of a drainage pipe into the harbor, a group of happy sewer rats on her back, and they're all singing opera. She's the lead, of course, and they're the chorus. And they are snooze, says Whirl, and moments later the owl comes into land, perching on the edge of the basket. He looks at them through bleary eyes. It's a bit of an early start for me, he yawns, but just to let you know that the woodland creatures are all present and ready to depart. We've named our boat Sugartail, honoring your mother, Whirl. He blinks his great big eyes and clears his throat. Though why we couldn't set sail at night, I'll never know. Then let's get going, says Froggo. To Animalia, he cries. On the signal, Whirl and Wilhelmina fire flares into the air like giant fireworks. Ratsy in a sea's captain's hat waves up at them from the lead boat. Engines start, whistles blow, horns blare, they're off to a new life. The excitement that day is matched only by the excitement when the rag-bag fleet finally reaches the island. It's arrival day at Animalia. Each animal is greeted individually, and the strong and the tall lift the weak and the small off the vessels. Once they're all ashore, the celebrations begin. Chief Bison makes a speech, interrupted time and time again by cheering from the islanders, old and new. Then it's party time. It's time for the biggest tropic island hum in Animalia's history. Everyone rejoices. Everyone, that is, except Wackford, who's now in a waiter's uniform, 2 sizes too small for him, carrying heavy, heaving trays of food to the animals he once frightened with his whip. And the very bald Gretch, who's been made the official babysitter for the night. Muddles, the baby hippo, is circling her, feinting punches with his boxing gloves, while the young ostrich and his friends are busy covering her in custard. Why? Because it's fun. The band strikes up, and in one voice the animals sing Animalia's anthem, "We all stand together!" Whittle turns to Wilhelmina. If only Mom was with us, he says. It's thanks to her and her stories that we're all here now. She is here, says Wilhelmina. There, painted in the night sky, is what looks like a squirrel with a bushy tail, powdery and white, like sugar. The end of the beginning. You can judge a man's true character by the way he treats his fellow animals. So always treat your animals right, kids. And hey, that's it. So, not too shabby of a story, huh? At least it was entertaining. What else should I say? What else should I say? Oh yeah, tell me what your favorite part of the book was. And let me know if I should read aloud a lot more, especially during this time of uneasiness. So your feedback would be, I would appreciate your feedback a lot. Thank you.